Up next, George Haas joins us. The Cydonia Codex.
Images. The disappointing thing that they've done with these two images, they took them at direct sunlight. This formation is on the side of a valley, and so it's very similar to what you would see if you went to the Stone Mountain Confederate Memorial in Georgia.
Yeah,
it's like right on the side of a hill. This isn't like the Mount Rushmore, which is almost three-dimensional heads that you have on the side of a mountain. These are sculpted in low relief, so that's a good comparison to the Stone Mountain Memorial. So what we're seeing is these sculptures of these facial features on the side of a mountain, and when the sun was coming up, shining directly on the formation, NASA took these two pictures. I don't know if that was intentional. As you know, any type of three-dimensional sculpture that you take in direct sunlight, you're going to lose a lot of the depth.
And it could have been built, George, for a certain time period of sun to hit it also.
That's one of the things Greg's work, his early work, looking at the formation, he had suggested that. And that, any kind of sculpture is relying on, sun and shadow. Early on, when NASA made fun of the face on Mars and said it was just a trick of light and shadow, any three-dimensional sculpture is a trick of light and shadow. I mean, that's how you get, the form.
How big is the object?
The overall shape of the formation, it's interestingly, doing the science paper, we had Jim Miller come in and he did all the measurements of the formation. And the overall size of the formation of the three faces there, it's a square shape, which is interesting. The whole formation is a square box where all this sits in, and it measures 876 meters square,
wow,
which is about 2,874 feet.
Yeah, almost 3 football fields. Jeez.
Yeah, well, everything on Mars is big. I mean, the face on Mars, the parrot formation that we discussed earlier on some of the other shows. Interestingly, that early on you put up the picture of the parrot formation. NASA just released a new image of that with their Mars Reconnaissance CTX camera. So now we have 5 images of that parrot formation. So it's just a waiting game with NASA to get these images. It's like pulling teeth, as people say. But
as a matter of fact, that's almost 8 football fields. You said 800 plus meters, right?
It's 876 meters square.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's huge.
It's 2,800.
2,000 plus feet. Yeah.
2,000. Yeah,
that's big.
This is all big stuff. And so, Greg was the one that originally found this, and actually, this science paper that we're talking about tonight, you're so gracious to have me on here to promote this and have. We're not making any money on the Science Journal. The website that people can go to for the Journal of Space Exploration, they can download the PDF and read it for free.
Great.
There's
Thank
no book they have to buy. And the Journal just put out a special all Mars issue. So every paper in this new issue has to do with the possibility of artificial structures on Mars. And I think there's like 8 or 9 papers, and all of the authors are members of the Society for Planetary SETI Research. Dr. Brandenburg happens to be one of the board members of the journal, so they kind of been working on this, putting this idea together for a while. So the journal just came out, and I sent out the notices, and you guys got me right on here pretty quick.
Absolutely. When we want this as a breaking story, George, and it's perfect timing for this. A lot of people, if you lie back on your back during a nice summer day and look at the clouds, you can probably make a picture out of the clouds and say, well, look at that. There's a dog, or there's a face, there's this or that. Are we doing the same thing with this structure?
Well, when you're looking at clouds, cloud formations are normally, they're very fluffy, very cotton-looking. There's no detail. But what we're finding, especially with this formation that we have here, when we examine the surface patterns observed here, there's facial formations what we're seeing here is 3 sliced portraits.
Let's talk about those 3 sliced portraits when we come right back. Now remember, we're going to be live on Christmas Eve night and on Christmas night So make sure you're part of the program. Lots of people, after they get done with their festivities, love to listen to radio, and so we'll be here for you, of course. And welcome back to Coast. George Haas with us from the Cydonia Institute. His works, of course, on his website, which happens to be linked up at coasttocoastam.com. But definitely look at the graphics and pictures that he has sent us that we've got for you at coasttocoastam.com. George, we're talking about, whether the face could be created in one's mind as you sit back and, just think of objects, and there it is. And you're talking about 3 separate portraits. Tell me about that.
Yeah, when Greg first found this, he thought this was just a symmetrical face that was just one facial image. Mm-hmm. But he had a lot of problems with trying to figure out the orientation of the features. If you look at the face there on image A, the 2000 image from the Mars Global Surveyor, mm-hmm. The interesting thing about the portrait is that it's almost photographic if you look at it. The facial features, it has a real tonality about it. There is an eye, there's a nose, a mouth. The interesting thing about the eye, one of the things that Greg noticed early on, was that they are both right eyes. The portrait on the left, the half of the face there has a right eye, and the other portrait in the middle has a right eye. So you have two right eyes. And then the third face on the other side is more obscured, but we'll talk about that a little later. So the 2 faces that Greg and a lot of the earlier researchers focused on were those first 2 faces. And when you look at this, you figure, well, why would somebody depict these sliced images of faces, just half faces and then another half face next to that and then another half face? It just doesn't make any sense to your average viewer. If you go on the Coast to Coast page and go down to image C, there's an image of a Aztec split face. It's called the 3 faces of life. You have the youth, old age, and death. These are the 3 stages of man's life. And what they've done here is they've sliced these faces in a very similar way that you have these conjoined-looking faces on Mars. So this is a cultural reference. You ask about, is this something that you would see in clouds? Well, we're seeing actual, facial features here mm-hmm. that have proper orientation. You have an eye. There's a suggestion of irises, nose, nostril, mouth, chin. So there's a lot more detail than just looking at a fuzzy little image of a cloud. And now we have an explanation that we're seeing here, a comparison that we could show that, well, this is why we're seeing these sliced portrayals of the faces, because it's a similar thing that the Maya did this also, but this Aztec image. And through my own research, I have art as my background. I'm a painter, a sculptor. The reason I'm involved in these science papers is because I bring the artistic research into these papers. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a geologist. The paper that we just had published in the Journal of Space Exploration, there's 2 of the authors are geologists. Jim Miller's an image analyst, and my background's art. And another explanation for this whole idea of doing these sliced, conjoined faces is found in modern American art. You look at Mark Rothko in the early 1940s, he did a whole series of paintings that had the same theme going on, where he would put these sliced images of faces stuck together. And this is a perfect example here, this painting, The Omen of the Eagle from 1942 by Mark Rothko. The top band of faces at the top of the painting in image number, or letter D in the Coast to Coast file of images for the show tonight, you can see that painting by Mark Rothko and how I'm showing how it's very similar to what we're seeing in this sliced portrayal of partial faces that we're finding on Mars and with this image called the crown face. If you look at the first head there, that partial head in the Rothko painting at the bottom, just below the crop image that I put up there of the crown face, I mean, it's kind of spooky that the hair treatment that Rothko did on the top of that first portrait almost looks like the cliff crown.
It's matched.
It's pretty spooky.
Yeah, it is matched. What do you think? Let's assume for a moment there were inhabitants on Mars, and they made this structure, this portrait-like structure. What were they trying to do? Was it something to leave behind? Was it a message to us? What do you think it was?
Well, in our first two books, my co-author William Saunders and I, and we have a third book that we're going to be having coming out next year, hopefully. Our contention is that all of these structures, including the face on Mars, the Parrot Formation, these are all geoglyphs that are telling a story, a creation story, in their own right. They're all different parts of the story. Mm-hmm. And I think they were put there purposefully for us to find, once we were able to build spaceships and go around the moon and then go to the other inner planets, that we would find this stuff by flying over. All of these images are things like the Nazca Lines and some of the older American Indian structures and these earthworks that you see from above. And they would assume that we would be able to go to the planets in a vehicle that would orbit these planets and see these structures on the ground or on the sides of these valleys that we're seeing here with this crown face, and be able to recognize these and hopefully figure out what the story was. And we think that a lot of this information is coming from Mesoamerican mythology.
It's amazing. What I find, though, George, is so fascinating is truly it looks Egyptian, and Cairo, capital of Egypt, Cairo means Mars. Right.
Well, a lot of the Mesoamerican gods and mythologies are very similar to Egyptian gods, as are it's like ancient Greek. The Greek gods were all adopted, and then the Romans took in all of those types of attributes for their gods that they copied from the Greeks. This is a similar thing we're seeing in Sumerian, Mesoamerican, and also Egyptian art. A lot of the gods and the mythologies, the stories are very, very similar.
When you look at this picture, why can't, when we're working on plans to go to Mars in the next 15 years, let's say, why aren't we saying we're going there? We're going to find out what is happening there.
Well, there's so many places to go. A lot of people would like to go to Cydonia area, I'm sure. This is another area of interest. Any of these sites that have these geoglyphic formations would be a great place to start.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. But why don't we do it?
It's all politics. I'm sure from all of the things that we have found that NASA is well aware of these formations on the surface of Mars, and they just aren't going public with it.
Tell me a little bit now about the science paper you've been working on.
Besides this one here?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have two more papers that we're submitting to, I think last year when I was on, we were talking about the Queen Nefertiti face.
Right.
That was submitted to the Staff 2 conference. The conference is coming up again in April, and William Saunders and I, the same team that's been working on this crown face, Jim Miller and...
your team has done a great job with this.
Well, thank you. I
really
appreciate it coming from you. That sounds very nice. It's William Saunders, Michael Dale, who's a geologist. We're all working on two more papers that are going to be submitted to the Staff 2 conference in April. One is a wedge and dome formation. It's a structural formation that has nothing to do with faces and these types of geoglyphs. This is more of a structure. I don't know if you've seen it on the internet. It's been around for a long time. This is another formation that was discovered by Greg Orm and brought to our attention. And it's been all over the internet. People have made videos about it.
Yeah.
They call it the exclamation mark.
Yes.
So we're working on a very focused science paper on that formation, which will be presented at the conference if the paper is accepted. And then another geoglyphic formation of another facial feature which actually appeared in our second book, the Mars Codex. The crown face was actually also, it appeared in our second book, just the original Mars Global Surveyor image, because like I had said earlier, we only had the one image. And we have a chapter in our second book, the Mars Codex, More Reflections from Mars, a whole chapter dealing with the crown face. And in that same book, we also have a chapter on a formation called the Viking Lord, it looks like a profiled face of a Viking head. He's got a headdress. There's a bird on top of his head. He's got a beard, a mustache, and he's got a headdress, a helmet, and a flap on the side. It's pretty startling.
Does it seem like Mars is just teeming with these kinds of images?
Yes, they seem to be all over the place. And now that Bill and I and other people that we work with have been doing this, we go through Mars Global Surveyor strips or the new Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter CTX images, and you go through 10 images, and within the 10 you probably find 3 or 4 formations that do not look right.
Well, that's remarkable.
It seems to be teeming with pictographic images and also pyramidal. There's lots of pyramids, and they're set up in areas like they look like they've been under a lot of distress and ruin and erosion. But if these things, like Mark Carlotto said years ago, if these formations were on Earth, there'd be no question that we were looking at archaeological ruins and cities and things. So it's pretty remarkable.
Do they seem to be clustered in terms of the structures, like cities?
And although a lot of the formations at Cydonia seem to have these interesting alignments, the 19.5 and all the things that Hoagland talked about, and Horace Crater has a paper in the new journal dealing with some of the formation alignments in Cydonia. That doesn't ring true throughout some of the other areas, but again, you can compare these complex, the way that the whole place is laid out with its architecture and the alignments. Some of them don't even appear to be aligned correctly. Like you would say, well, this isn't comparable to Cydonia, where everything seems to be lined up, and this point, addresses that point over there, and everything seems to be a perfect alignment. And some of these other areas, although the structures do look artificial, they seem to be haphazard. But getting back to Mesoamerican cultures, there's many sites of Mesoamerican structures with pyramids that seem to be placed at haphazard areas in these little complexes that don't seem to make any sense. So that wouldn't be a marker to signify that these are artificial structures, because you could show the same thing with Earth cultures that don't have buildings that are all in a row and line up and have all these points of alignment.
Well, what's amazing too is Mars reminds me of the movie Star Wars, because when you look at the Star Wars movies, there are no skyscrapers and high technology looking buildings or anything. What you do have is you have a lot of stone structures, a lot of stone huts and houses, and incredible technology. And when you look at Mars and just kind of put that over as a Star Wars image, same kind of thing. They may have had high technology.
More like arcologies that have these domes or structures at the top, and there's probably the major parts of the structures are underground.
Or underground, that's right.
And I think most of these structures on Mars were built after Mars was a dead planet. I'm sure you had Dr. Brandenburg on talking about his whole idea, which has a lot of scientific support to support his theory, that I think all this stuff we're seeing now was built after that.
As a visitation?
As maybe people going back from, after the catastrophe that happened.
From wherever, that's right.
Yeah. It may be the same people or other people, or races, we don't know. I mean, this is all just wild speculation.
Sure.
But like you said, if we went there and, there was a public interest to do this, hopefully this issue of the Journal of Space Exploration, which has all of these interesting papers in there, that maybe it'll get people's attention, and maybe some other scientists. That's one of the reasons they're doing this big issue, is they're trying to attract new scientists to this interest in this endeavor that we're doing here.
Would you call the journal prestigious?
It's been around for 3 years. It was originally owned and run by a company in Japan. It's not a United States company. It's out of Japan, and they were just sold before the issue came out to a new company called Trade Sciences.
All right.
So it's
but I mean, they take this seriously, don't they?
Oh yeah. Well, the paper's peer reviewed. And some of the other journals that they have deal with physics and things like that, and so it's a peer-reviewed journal.
All right, well, that's good.
But I don't know if
gives it some credibility
because of some of the topics in there. People may not think it was prestigious.
What did you conclude in your paper?
Well, with the two geologists, if you look at the geological section in the paper. For the facial features to be formed naturally through natural geology.
And erosion and things like that.
Right. There's a lot of conflicting geology in the area, mostly dealing with the third face, that whole eye there that almost looks like it's almost like a butterfly wing type of eye that's going on there. And it has like all this lattice work and structure. It just doesn't fit into the other geological features that are there. And there doesn't seem to be any evidence that any of these structures it's like erosion and things had fallen off to create all this. Greg early on thought that the reason that they didn't have a full nose on the first face was because he thought part of it might have fallen off.
That's right.
But there's no evidence, and we have in all of the images we have evidence of the base of the valley wall there, and there's no debris at all. There's just sand dunes.
We have seen other structures and artifacts on Mars that our rovers have been taking pictures of over the years. Now, granted, a lot of them can be, up for interpretation. But some of them look pretty darn uncanny. There's the one that looks like a petrified iguana. Have you seen that picture?
Yeah, I've seen that. I think that
it's weird.
It's gotten a lot of attention. I think that's just one of those quirks of a rock that kind of looks like an iguana. I'm not sure what that is. If it's part of just a sculpture that's broken or something like that. But there seems to be a lot of mechanical and machinery things that are all broken in bits and pieces, and it's almost falls in line with what Brandenburg's saying about this big explosion in war or whatever went on up there. It seems to be there's all this mechanical debris and structural debris everywhere.
Yeah, like a crash or something.
Oh yeah, a lot of things crashed, blown up, and all kinds of stuff. Yeah,
all over the place.
Yeah, parts of columns. One guy I had seen on Facebook, one of these little groups. There seems to be an area that has this. There's like a gully that goes down in this one area, and it looks like there's remains of like brick wall. I mean, it actually has a gridded out area.
It's like the Alamo.
Yeah, kind of like that.
That kind of look. George, stay with us. We're going to take this break. We're going to come back and talk.